Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City Council District 4 Candidates Forum, which Carnegie Hill Neighbors is hosting. My name is Lo Vandervalk, and I'm president of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. We're so glad you could join us to hear directly from individuals seeking to represent our community. This is a valuable opportunity to learn directly where each candidate stands on the issues that matter most. Our goal tonight is to foster a respectful conversation that can help you make an informed decision at the polls. We thank our candidates. For being here, and thank you, our audience, for taking the time to engage in this good government process. I just want to say a few words about Carnegie Hill Neighbors, or an overview. The council members are responsible for proposing, debating, and voting on local laws and city budget. They also advocate for constituents' needs, help resolve local conflicts, and oversee city agencies to ensure they're serving the community effectively. At Carnegie Hill Neighbors, we work to protect historic character of our streets, care for the green spaces, and promote safety, and bring neighbors together to help our local community and the people in it thrive. The City Council is critically important to us for the important reasons tied to local advocacy, zoning, preservation, and quality of life. The council member serves as CHN's direct line to the city government. Building a strong relationship ensures the neighborhood's voice is heard on citywide issues that affect residents and local businesses, and they are our direct contact to the city government. I would like now to introduce the moderator, Melissa Grace. Melissa is a long-term resident of Carnegie Hill and a senior vice president of Rubenstein Communications. She has 30 years of experience in communications, specializing in land use, real estate, and economic development. She previously held senior roles in New York City government, including the City Planning Commission and the Mayor's Office, where she led media efforts on major rezonings such as the Greater East Midtown rezoning. She is a former journalist at the Daily News and holds a master's degree from Columbia School of International and Public Affairs and a BA in political science from the University of Colorado. I would now like to turn the mic over to Melissa.
Thank you, Lo, very much, and welcome everybody. I'm happy to be here. So we'll be hearing from our 6 candidates, each answering 3 questions this evening. The candidates are Vanessa Aronson, Faith Bondi, Luke Florchak, Virginia Maloney, Rachel Storch, and Ben Wexler. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer the first question, including introducing themselves and their vision. After that, each candidate has 2 minutes to respond to questions, so the second 2 questions. Candidates will respond in alphabetical order by their first names for the first question, with the orders reversed for the second and reversed again for the third. I will make sure that everybody knows who's up. The goal is to keep things moving while offering us all a clear sense of where each candidate stands and their vision for this important office, which they can elaborate on as they choose. But first, I am going to offer brief bios for each candidate. Ben Wexler, we'll start with Ben Wexler, began his career in state government in 2012, where he is focused on affordable housing and community development. In 2017, he successfully challenged the long-serving Democratic Party district leader representing Lenox Hill and Roosevelt Island, earning the position and serving in that role until 2023. There, he used his housing policy expertise to advocate for an aggressive affordability agenda for New York City. Faith Bondi is a seasoned litigator with more than 25 years of experience. As an East Midtown resident, public school parent, and active community leader, Faith has championed issues ranging from education and public safety to housing and quality of life. She serves as president of the Samuel J. Tilden Democratic Club, sits on the boards of the Sutton Place Parks Conservancy and the East 60s Neighborhood Association, and is the former member of Community Board 8. Luke Florchak, a former Marine musician, currently serves as on the executive board of the Eleanor Roosevelt Independent Democrats and volunteered on Councilmember Keith Powers' most recent campaign. Luke works in the John Jay Office of Military and Veterans Services and collaborates with organizations that support veterans across New York City. Rachel Storch is a former 3-term Missouri state representative. After moving back to New York in 2010, Rachel held leadership roles at the 92nd Street Y. She currently serves as the COO of the Fifth Avenue Synagogue. She's focused on public safety, education, affordable housing and childcare, and combating rising anti-Semitism and quality of life issues. Vanessa Aronson is a former president of the Lexington Democratic Club, a judicial delegate, and a member of the New York County Democratic Committee. Vanessa proudly represented our county as a diplomat, both overseas and in New York. She also previously served on Community Board 8 and co-chaired the Tikkun Olam Committee at Park Avenue Synagogue. Her professional background includes roles as a New York City public school teacher and senior advisor to the president of Hunter College. Virginia Maloney's commitment to public service is rooted in her family's legacy and her own dedication to community engagement. Virginia's campaign focuses on addressing the city's affordability crisis, expanding and protecting affordable housing, ensuring community safety, supporting seniors, and defending progressive values. She emphasizes accountability in city budgeting and has a background in both public and private sectors, including experience at Meta and the city's Economic Development Corporation. So that's everybody. We're going to go on to our first question now. Please remember the candidates are to respond in alphabetical order by their first names. I will call out your names. You will each have 3 minutes for this first question. So the first question, if elected, what are your funding priorities for the district? What services or projects would you specifically like to see funded, which are not currently being funded or could be enhanced and improved? Please also touch on how you will better hold the mayor and city agencies accountable for issues in the community. For example, the Department of Sanitation and the Department of Transportation. We will start with Ben.
Hi, everyone. You can all hear me, right?
Yes.
Great. My name is Ben Wetzler. I grew up here on the Upper East Side. I served for 6 years as the neighborhood's Democratic Party district leader, and I'm here today because I'm running for New York City Council, and I hope to earn your support. I'm a lifelong public servant whose career has been focused on creating data-driven policy solutions to problems affecting New Yorkers. I started out with the State Division of the Budget in Albany, and then for the last 8 years, I've been working in housing policy with the state's Affordable Housing Agency. I'm running for the council right now because there's a real lack of strategic thinking in New York City government. We kind of react to crises rather than anticipating them, and there's not really any institutional vision for the long-term path and the vitality of the city. I think the 2 areas where that's most obvious to me are in public safety, where we need to implement more proactive and data-driven policing solutions and identify hotspots of criminal activity before it happens, so we can deploy officers there. And then on housing, where we really need a comprehensive long-term plan for where we can create new housing in place of the current ULURP process, which is very reactive and doesn't serve the city's needs. So those are, main things that I want to do with my campaign, and that's my vision for the neighborhood. In terms of the question about funding priorities, I'd like to actually start with the second part about oversight, because there will very likely in the next term be pretty significant pressure on the city's budget due to the Trump administration's posture towards the city. And it's very likely that we in the council, if I'm elected to the council, will have to be more focused on filling the gaps that are left by the federal government than anything else. And we're going to really need to be focused on efficiency and getting the most out of our tax dollars. When I began my work with the budget division, I was doing performance analytics. At one point, I had a database of everybody who walked into the DMV anywhere in New York State and what they were doing, how long it took them to do it, how we could identify opportunities for efficiencies and devise solutions. And I don't think I've ever seen in my time in politics a council member during an oversight committee ask for that kind of information on that in that level of detail where they'd be able to actually do something like that. The reports that the agencies issue are often, focus more on what went in than what came out of their department. And there's a real, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas attitude, which I think that, I would really want to change and is going to be important going forward. As for the specific departments that I think are most vulnerable to cuts and have to be our highest priorities, the two would probably be the operations of the school system, which are right now particularly vulnerable to the Trump administration because they've pulled back a lot of operations funding from the city, from the education department already. And at the same time, we're trying to comply with a state mandate to reduce class sizes. So that's likely going to put a lot of pressure on our neighborhood schools.
Let me just
And
say
then
you're
the second,
about 10
is that
seconds.
3 minutes
left.
already?
Nope, you got about 10 seconds left.
Okay, great. And then the second one is our mental health system, because the failure to get our homeless population into meaningful care has become a pretty major safety concern. So those are my two.
Thank you, Ben, very much. Faith, you're up next. Faith, are you there?
Faith, you're muted.
Apologies, out of respect. I was muted and no one could hear me. So I'm Faith Bondi. I am a mom, I'm an attorney, and I've been a community leader and advocate in this community for decades. And I'm committed to seeing it thrive and fighting for its residents and businesses and visitors. And that commitment can best be seen through my decades of work dedicated to our schools, our parks, and neighborhoods and those in need. Throughout our community, whether it's my work through the Tilden Democratic Club, the East 60s Neighborhood Association, the board of the Sutton Place Parks Conservancy, my work as an active member of Central Synagogue, volunteering to help those in need, my work on the Street Life Committee of Community Board 8, the school leadership teams of 2 local PTAs, including as president of the Salk School of Science, and with the dozens of community organizations in which I've been involved. And my vision for our community is really to improve the quality of life for everyday New Yorkers, and to have a city council and leaders who understand that what they do every day has real world impact on New Yorkers, and have leaders who listen and really engage meaningfully with their constituents on a daily basis. That helps us restore confidence in people's confidence in government. And every day when we're out on the streets, we see more and more people who are disheartened, not only because of what's going on at the federal level, but people who feel that their electeds aren't listening to them. And we need to change that. My funding priorities are for our schools, for our parks, for sanitation services, really our basic services. I think particularly as we're seeing budget cuts, we really need to get back to basics. We need to invest in our mental health services. We need to invest in public safety. We need to invest in our schools to make up for those differences. We need to make sure that those funding priorities and those agencies are using those monies efficiently. The way that we make sure and hold the mayor and those agencies accountable is we use our oversight authority to do so. And we call agencies on the carpet. We follow up. We make sure that programs are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and those that aren't, we go in and we say, why not? And we talk about reallocating funding. And so we really get in the trenches and we get down deep, and we don't just check boxes. And if programs and legislation isn't working, we go back and we try and fix it, and we don't just forget about things that we do. And New Yorkers deserve better, and affordability, of course, is a really important thing. So childcare is another one. And we don't, so I think we just need to hold ourselves and our electeds accountable. So
Thank you, Faith. Luke, you are next.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Luke Florzak. There's a few things that set me apart from these very highly qualified individuals. To start with, I served 8 years in the Marine Corps, and I know when you typically think of veteran, you don't picture somebody that looks like me. But that's one of the reasons for that misconception. There's 250,000 veterans that live in New York City, and for the last decade, not a single veteran has been elected to local office. And it's for this fact alone that has driven me to even want to run for office in the first place. Another thing that sets my career apart is I was a musician as a child. I studied music composition at a music conservatory. And I would have gone into scoring music for the movies had it not been for, events in the early 2010s, which inspired me to serve my country. ISIS was getting big. They did a few things on TV that really influenced my decision to want to do something for good. So after my first degree, I enlisted in the Marines, and afterward decided to return to school and studied political science at a CUNY system at John Jay. It was around last year that I attended a city council committee on veterans, and I really felt like that was the path to helping. And for me, it felt more like a choice, but or not a choice, but an obligation. And so away from the veteran community, I'm running on a platform to address public safety, public education, and to develop a stronger community spearheaded by the arts. When it comes to the question of funding and budgetary ideas, first and foremost, I think, especially in Carnegie Hill, is sanitation. Second would be addressing public safety, but also, investing in construction companies that actually put time and effort into, lowering labor costs. There are technologies that are used around the globe that can limit construction costs by 20 to 30%, and they're rarely used in the US. Another thing that I would push heavily for in terms of budgeting would be mental health. We also got to, be able to properly fund libraries and the cultural institutions, especially that are in Carnegie Hill. And lastly, I think something else to take into account is, like it's been said, is protecting the budget from federal agencies, that are going to be cut. It's on us to, be that stopgap.
Very much. Rachel is next.
Thank you. And thank you so much to the Carnegie Hill neighbors for hosting this evening's program. I am a mother raising 4 fifth-generation New Yorkers on the East Side, and we have spent much of the past 15 years in the Carnegie Hill neighborhood. Prior to my current position as COO at Fifth Avenue, I did work at the 92nd Street Y, which most of us know as an iconic neighborhood institution. And whether it was at the Y or elsewhere throughout the years, I have spent much time traversing the streets in Carnegie Hill, taking my kids to various sports, theater, or art activities, or supporting local businesses like Corner Bookstore or Food Liberation. So I know how important it is that we elect a council member who will ensure that this neighborhood is preserved for generations to come. But what I feel today is that there has been a general decline in safety and quality of life in New York City. And it doesn't take more than a walk down the block to see it, to hear it, often to smell it. New York is facing a crisis around public safety on the streets and subways, epidemics of mental health and homelessness, and a crisis around affordability, particularly around housing and childcare. For the last 5.5 years, I have served as COO at Fifth Avenue and at the Y before that, but I did have a previous chapter in elected office. I served 3 terms as a state legislator, as legal counsel in the state Senate, and policy director for the state Senate, and deputy chief of staff in the United States Senate to Senator Carnahan. I started my career as a legal aid attorney with a focus on Medicaid. So for me, I look around and I see fixable problems. As someone who considers herself a common sense problem solver with a lot of years of experience, I will hit the ground running on day one to be effective and make sure the city is working efficiently for my family and yours. I did have the privilege of serving 6 6 years on the Budget Committee when I was in office, I've always viewed it as an expression of our values and priority. The budget is where we deliver for the communities around us. I support a participatory budgeting process for the city where the public can weigh in. I think that strengthens civic engagement and the democratic process. For me, in terms of broader funding priorities, I strongly see public safety as a top priority, investments in mental health, in sanitation, and small business. Our NYPD, unfortunately, is quite depleted. We need to add at least 5,000 more officers to have a fully staffed department so that they can patrol the streets and subways where we need them, serve as a deterrent to rampant retail theft, which has plagued so many of our local businesses. As a former legal aid attorney, I feel very strongly about the need to make thoughtful, compassionate investments into mental health care, particularly around supportive housing and wraparound services. We absolutely need full and robust funding for the Department of Sanitation. And I think we need to use all available data to effectively identify problems. We need to implement procedures to systematically analyze complaints, establish some internal oversight mechanics, and make sure that we're really improving coordination with other city agencies like NYPD to enforce the regulations and address chronic issues. And my final priority, and I know I'm out of time, would be small business.
Thank you very much. Next up is Vanessa.
Hi, thank you so much for having us today. My name is Vanessa Aronson. I'm a public educator and public school parent, community and nonprofit leader, and a former diplomat. I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets, and I know how to keep a complex system afloat without sacrificing essential functions and services. As a community leader, I've testified for healthcare affordability, consumer protections, affordable housing, and transparency in government. And as a diplomat, I had the honor of representing our country on the world stage. Life in New York shouldn't be this hard. We face an affordability and housing crisis, mental health and public safety concerns, rampant inaccessibility across the city, and a crisis of confidence in government. I'm the candidate you can trust to lead us in this pivotal moment for our city. My funding priorities will focus on the services and infrastructure that directly impact daily life for residents in our district. We need a budget that reflects our values, a city that is clean, safe, and equitable. So first, we must increase funding for basic sanitation services. The East Side is currently deprioritized for trash pickup and snow removal. Even the Department of Sanitation has acknowledged this. And this is unacceptable. So I'll fight for equitable resource distribution and more public waste and recycling bins throughout the district. Second, I'll advocate for safer, more accessible streets. And that means funding sidewalk and curb repairs, especially where uneven curb cuts and unnecessary scaffolding force pedestrians to dangerously detour onto busy streets and bike lanes. Third, I'll address the mental health crisis that is at the root of many public safety concerns and has been neglected by City Hall. There is a mental health facility on Randall's Island that once had the capacity to serve 4,000 individuals with inpatient beds. After years of underfunding, there are now only 50 long-term inpatient beds available. A long overdue reinvestment in mental health is crucial to keeping our community and streets safe. And to address a citywide shortage of mental health professionals in the public system, I propose the creation of a student loan repayment program to help recruit and retain psychiatric care professionals at New York City Health and Hospitals.
30 seconds left.
Thank you. I also want to focus on affordable childcare in local schools. Currently, the Schools Construction Authority will only consider planning for additional schools when the current schools are at 150% capacity. And that's just not right for our families. These aren't isolated issues, they're deeply connected. And solving them takes leadership that's ready to act, not just talk. I'll deliver bold, practical solutions, you can see a lot of them on my website, that reflect the urgency of the crises, because I believe that together we can build a city where no one is left behind.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Virginia, you are next.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate being here with so many people who care deeply about our community. My name is Virginia Maloney. I'm a native New Yorker, and I was born and raised in Carnegie Hill, where my mother still lives. I learned to swim at the 92nd Street Y, grew up eating Ura's pinwheels, and singing at my favorite event, the Park Avenue tree lighting. Many know my mother, who represented this district, but it was my late father, Clifton Maloney, who was the most active member of Carnegie Hill Neighborhood Association and also on the board of Civitas. My parents led by example, demonstrating the importance of service day in and day out. And while I live a full 15 blocks south of Carnegie Hill, I'm in the neighborhood all the time visiting my mom or at Brick Church. My own career has bridged public and private sectors. In DC, working for Mayor Bloomberg to support small business growth, and now in the tech industry. I'm running for city council now because I believe that New York needs to be safer, more affordable, and a government needs to be more accountable, not just for some of us, but for all of us. On this campaign, I've focused on issues that make a big difference in our daily lives. New York is the greatest city in the world, but when government doesn't work, it can be a really tough place to live. To take a local example, in Carnegie Hill, you've had Madison Avenue ripped up for repaving, but then that repaving takes weeks to finish and it's still not done. In the meantime, pedestrians are using walkers or strollers and having a difficult time crossing what is essentially a 5-lane gravel pit. Traffic's at a crawl, and it's difficult to breathe in the dirt. This is not an accessible city, and this is not a government that's working for us. My priorities are the same of many New Yorkers. Public safety remains a top concern. Families and seniors are being priced out of their neighborhoods. Basic services from sanitation to mental health care are being neglected. All the while, Donald Trump and Republicans in Washington are attacking our hard-earned values. Here in District 4, my top funding priorities would focus on quality of life issues that affect residents every single day, from cleaner streets, accessible public space, strong public schools that prepare our kids for the future. First is sanitation. We need frequent trash pickups, which alleviate overflowing bins. Second is open green spaces. The River Esplanade and our neighborhood parks are treasures, and they're essential resources that keep us sane and healthy. And we need to prioritize funding for capital repairs, for lighting improvements, for safety upgrades. And the third is education, specifically STEM. I've seen firsthand the power of providing students with access to STEM education. I've been endorsed by New York's bravest, the firefighters, New York's brightest, the teachers, and New York's strongest, the sanitation workers, who are ready to take on this fight with me.
Thank you. Right on time.
Vibes up.
Now for our second question, you'll have, just a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes to respond to this one, so a little bit shorter. The question is, if elected, how will you empower the community board and neighborhood groups like this one in the area to have a stronger role in decision-making in the district? Virginia, you're back up again.
Okay. I think that community boards and neighborhood groups are the foundation of civic life in New York, and they must be empowered and protected to shape the decisions that impact our neighborhoods. These groups aren't just advisory bodies. They're made up of neighbors who live and work and raise families in these communities, and their knowledge and commitment to the neighborhoods are invaluable. One local example is the Lenox Hill Hospital redevelopment. I now live 1 block from the hospital. I care deeply about the health and well-being of my neighbors. And while I fully support modernization of Lenox Hill, it's a vital institution, it deserves investments and upgrades, but the current proposal is out of scale and would only add 25 beds and bring a potential of over a decade of disruptive construction. Northwell refused to meaningfully engage with the community despite countless attempts of groups like Carnegie Hill Neighbors, CB8, and other organizations. It wasn't acceptable, the level of collaboration. We were met with disregard. So as a city council member, I'd make sure that city agencies can't and developers can't steamroll over our communities. I think we need to formalize early stage community input on major developments and bring agencies like the Department of Buildings and City Planning to the table before decisions are made. I'd be sure to be a true partner. I'm someone who listens, I'm someone who shows up, and I would use the weight of the office to make sure that local voices are heard at every level of government. I know that when we empower our local groups and communities, we get smarter policy, we get better outcomes, and we get stronger neighborhoods. And that is what I would fight for every single day if I were elected.
Thank you very much. Vanessa, you're back up.
Thank you. So I am the only candidate in this race who has served as a full member of our local community board, CB8. And through that role, participating in ULURP as a member of the Land Use Committee and leading both the Youth Education and Libraries Committee and the Technology Committees, I've seen firsthand how vital it is to include local voices in major decisions. I've testified at hearings, stood alongside neighborhood groups, and experienced how often community input is sidelined in favor of special interests, especially when long-term impacts are at stake. I believe it is time for the status quo to change, and that starts with transparency. Citizens Union, which is a leading voice for ethics reform and good government, just named my candidacy as their #1 choice in this race because they know that I have what it takes to stand up to special interests and deliver truly responsive representation at City Hall. We run a deeply responsive campaign. We're constantly listening, engaging, and building a broad coalition of support that includes our local Democratic Club, the Lexington Democratic Club, labor unions, advocacy groups like the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees, parent advocates with NYC Kids PAC. It's a coalition big enough to reflect the diversity of thought, background, and experience across the district. And that's the kind of city council member I will be. I don't shy away from hard conversations. I'll work to make it easier for neighborhood associations, tenant groups, parent associations, and everyday constituents to engage directly with City Hall. I'll host regular town halls, community planning sessions, and ensure agency leaders are at the table with you listening. When communities are empowered, we make smarter, more sustainable decisions. And I've seen that from the inside. So I'll be the council member who brings your voice with me into every room.
Thank you so much. Rachel, back to you again.
Okay, thank you. I'm deeply committed to being an accessible and responsible government official who prioritizes community input and collaboration. And as a former legislator, I always made sure that I was in the district every week to attend local meetings, to listen, and to share information. I think we need to increase funding and technical support for the community boards. They do outstanding work, but they currently rely heavily on volunteers and sometimes have limited access to professional expertise, such as urban planners and data analysts. Adding to their technical resources would allow the community boards and other groups to engage more effectively with city agencies, to draft stronger resolutions, finding ways that they can help to initiate planning and policy recommendations rather than reacting to city proposals, can enhance their influence even further and make their role more substantive. Charter revisions could shift this so that the boards are more empowered to initiate planning and policy recommendations. I think we need to look for ways to encourage even broader participation, especially from historically marginalized groups, so that we can truly help boards advocate for neighborhood needs. I'm keenly aware that this spring marks the 60th anniversary of the Landmarks Law passed by the City Council in 1965, which protects our historic landmarks and neighborhoods from decisions that would destroy or fundamentally alter their character. That law also established the creation of a permanent New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. Without that landmarks law, Carnegie Hill wouldn't be the same as we know it. And I will work hand in hand with neighborhood associations who know our communities best to ensure that important landmarks are preserved. I have also, like some of the others, been outspoken about my opposition to the Lenox Hill Hospital expansion at its current size and scale, and have stood with the community boards and other neighborhood groups to advocate against it. I believe that meaningful governance goes far beyond making decisions in a vacuum, and I will actively seek out and value the input of neighborhood associations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Luke, you're next.
So first and foremost, the most important thing to me is transparency and openness. As a potential elected, I represent people, not special interests. And, that's why I've put more emphasis into listening to people rather than caring too much about how much is in my campaign war chest. The input of CB8 and CB6 is going to be crucial. And the first sort of sounding board when it comes to any sort of decision making when it at the city council level. The other thing is to provide outlets and provide opportunities for community organizations like Carnegie Hill Neighbors to interact with the community that may not ever be out and about. These highlight local artists, musicians, and authors at all levels. Hopefully making up for the deficits of the missing NEA, and whenever possible, financially supporting the arts.
Thank you very much. Faith, you are next.
So thank you. This is an issue that's particularly important to me. It's come up actually a couple of times in various screenings for different organizations, because there's lots of different special interest groups. So it would very much, particularly when it comes to community boards, like the elected, to appoint people to the community board that are limited in their views on particular issues. And I am a person who believes in community input. I have been actively involved in our community on various neighborhood associations and community groups for a very long time. And I have been involved with the Community Board 8. My husband sat on Community Board 8 as well. He also sat on Community Board 6. So I have a deep, deep connection with Community Board and Community Board 8 in particular for an exceptionally long time, and connection with the members there. I know how important they take their job on the community board, how thoughtful they are in considering each application and each role. I've personally also taken a position against the Lenox Hill renovation project, redevelopment project, and nobody takes those considerations lightly. And I think it's really important to take those, to take community input. And I think we need to make that community input even stronger. The community is most impacted by these projects, and their view is the most important view, and they need to be a part of the project. And so I've been involved in engagement, in meetings, and in putting together a task force, particularly when there's been establishments that have been nuisances to the community. And I think we need to foster those going forward. And I think that's really important.
Thank you very much. Time's up. Ben?
Yeah, so I mentioned in my introductory remarks that I think the most important thing that we can be doing on housing policy, which is obviously land use is a big part of that, would be to kind of move away from our currently reactive, the ULURP process, where applications are treated one at a time. They're not thought about in terms of their broader impact on the neighborhood. They're not prospective. And most importantly, for the, most relevant to this question, they begin with a private applicant. They don't begin with the community. And that's the thing that I think is the most important to change, because ultimately what we really need to be doing is thinking, in 20 years, what are the city's needs going to be, not just around housing, but around schools, around infrastructure, and how can we make that fit into the fabric of the existing neighborhood in a way that works for people and it works for the city. And that's not the kind of thing that you're going to get with a purely bureaucrat-led process, and it's certainly not the kind of thing that you're going to get with a purely business-led process. I say that as a lifelong bureaucrat. But it ultimately needs to be a collaborative effort between elected officials who come in with a vision for the area, community members, and some understanding of what the future needs of the neighborhood are going to be. And that's really what I want to happen. In 2019, the city began a charter revision process similar to the one that they are going through right now, and I testified in favor of a big overhaul of our planning process along those lines, to have a kind of community-driven long-term planning process. There was a big coalition of organizations that were doing this. That ultimately did not happen, which I was disappointed in. But I ultimately think that that is the right thing for our neighborhood, and it would allow people who live here to be able to come and say, this is what our vision for the neighborhood is, not talking about, you know, when a plan is already in, it's already been certified, but, you know, looking forward.
Thank you very much, Ben. Okay, our third and final question for the candidates, and again, a reminder, you have 2 minutes. The current City Charter Commission is proposing changes to the city charter, which is the city's constitution, to lessen member deference, which means that individual council members will no longer be able to unilaterally veto land use projects in their district. Do you have a stance on this? Ben, back to you.
Oh, yeah, I just told you what I thought, how I thought the charter should be amended along these lines. You know, I've been following the current proposal, you know, the current process closely. There hasn't been a lot of information put out publicly, and I believe that they won't actually have final language going to the voters for the general election ballot until after the primary. So, you know, I don't think any of the candidates here are going to be able to take a firm, informed stance on this between now and the election, the primary election. But in terms of my broader thinking about member deference, ultimately, we need to have a planning process in which neighborhoods are not individually targeted, where every neighborhood is kind of expected to constantly be incrementally changing along what the city needs in a way that respects our historic building patterns and architecture, and, you know, the quality of life of the community there. And I, you know, going onto the city council, I ultimately think that I would approach member deference based on how much I think my other fellow council members are thinking with that in mind. If another person on the council wants to support a project, whether it's in an adjacent district or you know, another part of the city where, you know, they're hearing nothing but special interest groups, they're not taking the input of the community in mind, and they're saying, you know, well, we're going to kill this unless we get XYZ, whatever, or, you know, in the opposite scenario where they really want to approve a project that is unpopular with their constituents because, you know, they're being lobbied in some other way, but not with, you know, the impact, an understanding of the impact that it might have on the rest of the neighborhood, I would not be willing to defer in that case.
Thank you very much. Right on time. Faith, you're back up.
Great. So similar to what Ben said, without actually knowing what the proposal is, it's hard to opine on it. But as a general matter, I do think that the council member that represents the district knows the district best, and their opinion should really matter, because if you elect the council person that has the district's interest in mind, they understand and should be listening to the constituents and the community groups and acting in the best interest of the community groups. That said, if there is a project that doesn't take the community's interest in mind, or has greater impact implications on the city as a whole, or it's, you know, straddles 2 districts and would have you know, a greater negative impact or positive impact that isn't being considered in the neighboring district, and let's say, you know, it represented your neighboring district and your constituents aren't being taken into consideration, there might be a circumstance where it shouldn't be followed. But as a general matter, I don't want some council member from another district and, you know, some outer borough coming in and saying what's in the best interest of my constituents, especially if they don't really know our district and they don't know the character and what impacts our district. And so people should be understanding and defer to what we understand and what we're hearing from our constituents, and understanding that we're listening to the people we represent and taking their consideration and their concerns in mind. And I should respect that if I'm elected, of those council members too. So unless there's something else running afoul, that's my general stance. But again, without seeing what the actual change is, that's my general view of member deference. But also I want to make sure we have a policy that allows building to like move on a steady pace too, but responsibly.
Thank you very much. Luke?
Hi. I'm not gonna need 2 minutes for this just because I feel like everybody here is gonna be saying the exact same thing. When it, on the basis of it, yes, each city council member represents their district as long as they are also representing the voice of, community groups, such as Carnegie Hill Neighbors. When it comes to shared collaboration, let's say between District 4, District 5, or District 2, and District 2, there needs to be, collaboration and mutual respect, mutual listening to both parties. But as for keeping with the historical precedent, I think that needs to be weighed just as much as progress needs to be made. And so, I'm in agreement with what's probably going to be said and what has been said already.
Got it. Thank you. Rachel, you're up. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry.
There you go.
I was saying that I actually feel slightly differently about this. I think that while individual council members should continue to have a very important role and voice on any projects within their respective districts and within their specific expertise, I don't really believe that members should have an effective veto power over other council members. I think that member deference is certainly it's well-intentioned as a way to respect local knowledge or district autonomy, but ultimately it can hinder effective citywide governance. When any single council member can unilaterally block projects, it can lead to inconsistent policy application across districts and frankly prevent the council from addressing some of the broader municipal needs. That is not to say, however, that there is not an extremely important role to play for prospective council members in serving as a voice and a microphone to represent the district, particularly in situations like the hospital expansion that we touched on earlier, or a casino entering a residential neighborhood. For me, throughout my legislative career, one of my greatest strengths has been serving as a unifier, bringing different voices to the table and building consensus across diverse perspectives. I think that the city and our nation need this more than ever. We need people who can find common ground, who can build consensus and understand the kind of relationship building that is necessary for effective legislating. And so for me, rather than relying on a procedural mechanism like member deference, I'm really committed to representing District 4 in such a way that my colleagues would understand and respect the needs of the district. I think that elimination of member deference encourages more robust debate, better policy outcomes, and ensures that decisions are made through genuine consensus building rather than procedural accommodation. The goal always should be governance that is both responsive to local district needs and effective at addressing the challenges that affect our entire city.
Thank you. Vanessa.
Thank you. As someone who served on the community board and participated in the land use process from the ground up, I know how essential local voices are. I believe land use decisions should be grounded in equity, transparency, and true community engagement, not political horse trading. While member deference has historically given local council members power to block or advance projects in their districts, it's been inconsistent in recent years. It's been overly politicized and sometimes vulnerable to influence that doesn't reflect the interests of the people most impacted. So I believe we need a land use process that is more inclusive, not less. That means mandating earlier and more meaningful community input, giving community boards real weight in the process, ensuring that land use decisions are driven by citywide equity goals like affordable housing, school capacity, transit access, rather than purely economic interests. I believe the land use process must be strengthened with real accountability. Too often on the Upper East Side, developers granted FAR increases under mandatory inclusionary housing fail to deliver the promised affordable units, especially when it's off-site. We need to scrutinize projects seeking variances in the name of affordability to ensure that they actually increase, not reduce the number of homes. Just across the street from my apartment, I'm pointing that way because that's my window. We've seen low-rise buildings demolished and replaced with luxury towers offering fewer units, even when developers meet legal requirements. And I just don't believe that that's progress. These are complex issues. My approach is always to listen deeply, weigh the long-term impacts, and consider how policies affect people's lives on the ground. I believe that thoughtful leadership, asking tough questions, pushing for real accountability, and making decisions that reflect the values of the community is what's most important.
Thank you very much. Virginia?
Thank you. I do support member deference because, as was said earlier on the call, the local council member is closest to the community and understands the real world impact a major development will have on the local community and the neighbors. I also would point out that member deference isn't just about land use. It's a tool for negotiating and a tool for securing good labor standards and meaningful community benefits as these developments play out. In the example of the hospital expansion, adding an elevator to make a subway station accessible. So member deference is a tool for the local member to leverage and helps bring developers to the table and insist on better outcomes for the community. There are cases where a project will have broad citywide implications that require the full council's input. And I do think there are examples of those, but they should be the exception, not the rule. Because I fear that undermining member deference would weaken the ability of labor and of local stakeholders to negotiate from a position of strength and end up with an outcome that is most beneficial to the city and to the fabric of our communities.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. We're coming to the end of our program. I want to thank everybody for coming and participating, the candidates in particular, but also our viewers or members. The candidates' websites will be in the chat or being put in the chat now. So if you please check those out if you want to learn a little bit more. You can also check out Carnegie Hill Neighbors' website, which is carnegiehillneighbors.org. A reminder that early voting starts June 13th and runs through June 22, and election day is June 24. Very important dates this year. So, and remember to request absentee ballots and all the things that you might be wanting and needing to do. And thank you very much and have a great evening.